One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Hey y'all, today we are back for another question from the community. And today's question is, what are you doing to increase listeners? So I don't care whether you've been doing this for months now, if you are in the creation stage and you haven't quite launched yet, this is the question that I see most often. It's all about, how do you grow? How do you get bigger? What do you do to increase listeners? So even if you had a fantastic launch and you have all of this momentum, the next natural question is, well, how do I not plateau? How can I keep going? How can I continue to reach more listeners on my end? Because I don't just want to be stagnant, right? I want to keep growing and I want to scale this podcast. So that is everything that we're going to talk about here today. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Krystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Because if you've been thinking about creating a podcast for a while, well, I'm so glad you found this show. Think of this as the shortcut / time-saving version of searching Google and YouTube for hours and hours trying to figure out the world of podcasting. Trust me, as a busy mama of 3, I get it. You don't have a lot of time to be spent or wasted, I should say, searching the web, trying to find all the right ideas and all the amazing things that are out there, and you just end up overwhelmed. Trust me, I've been there, done that, took home the souvenir. But this podcast is going to help you in practical ways, because twice a week we'll be delivering episodes that are going to give you steps to help you create a podcast your audience can't wait to listen to. So let's get right to it, shall we? So like I said in the beginning, I want to talk about increasing your listeners. That is the question from the community, and it's something that I see all the time. So I'm going to cover 3 specific things that you can do to increase your listeners. So the first thing I want to talk about is collaborating with people who have similar audiences. So in 2019, I participated in a few different campaigns where my audience was already hanging out. Either these were people that could potentially be my audience or people that they didn't even know. Like, I knew they were the right audience for me, but they didn't even know that this is what was coming. Like, I was coming at them. I'm like, hey, I've got like my secret weapon. I'm going to come talk to you about podcasting. So that might not have been their intention. Maybe they signed up for something and they didn't even know that podcasting was going to be a part of it. But I made sure that I zeroed in on exactly who my audience is. And I've said this before, but concentrating on exactly who you're talking to and understanding your audience on a deep level, well, it just opens up so many more opportunities, because there are some things that I can see now that if this was, in the very beginning of my podcast, I never would have recognized any of these opportunities as something that could lead to growing my listenership and increasing the number of people in my audience. But now that I understand exactly who my audience is, someone who they approach me with a potential collaboration, I can tell them immediately, yes, I want to work on that, or this doesn't really align with my overall goals. And I know that can be hard to tell somebody no, but I do this all the time. People approach me with a potential workshop or training or free, they want to do this free course. They want even a Facebook Live. And I know you're thinking, well, Krystal, that doesn't take a lot of time for you to go on live, for 30 minutes or an hour. But yes, it does. That's 30 minutes or an hour that I'm spending in front of an audience that isn't aligned with what I'm doing. So I just want you to look at opportunities where you can capitalize on events and workshops and even guesting on podcasts, being a part of people's lives. I see people go live on other people's Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. There's so many ways, and honestly, a lot of them are shiny objects where it sounds really cool to be invited to do some of these things. And you're thinking, yes. And I know if you're just getting started, I've been in this place where any opportunity to do anything sounds exciting. You're like, oh my gosh, someone, it's validation that you're on the right track and that you're doing these cool things. But if your audience isn't on the other side of their audience, then you're wasting your time. I know it kind of makes me cringe a little bit to say that, because I don't want you to say no to every opportunity. But if it's not you are so excited, you're so fired up to do it, then I don't want you doing it. I love the saying, if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no. So if you are super excited, everything is aligned, this collaboration is going to be important, you're going to be able to add value to their audience, and in return, whatever their promotions or their audience, you're receiving some type of value. If that is not happening, then it's a no. It's a no. I don't care if it's your best friend's sister, somebody who you owe them a huge favor, unless they're paying you to do it. I mean, that's a different story, but I just don't think that you should do it. I don't. No matter, even if they have millions of followers, if your audience isn't on the other side of that screen or those earbuds or, watching something, then you don't need to do it. So that's number one. I want you to collaborate with people who have a similar audience or someone that without a shadow of a doubt, there are potential listeners in their audience. And for me personally, in 2019, the most profitable organizations or collaborations that I did were with the Podcasters Kit, because I was able to do a free masterclass for them. And I actually increased, I want to say my email list grew by almost 200 people just from doing the Podcasters Kit. That might even be where you first heard about this podcast, but that collaboration was so vital to me growing my audience. I grew my email list, I grew my listener base, and I actually had a few students sign up for my program because of this collaboration. But I knew that it was a smart move. Guys, it's about podcasting. It's called Podcaster's Kit for a reason. And it was just a super cool way to meet up with other podcasters and learn from them. And it's a great organization. I really hope that they do it again in 2020 because it was awesome and it's very affordable and it's super jam-packed full of value. But one of the other things that I did is I was part of 3 very different virtual summits, and 2 of them, I will say, were very aligned with what I'm trying to accomplish with this podcast. And one of them, I felt like I don't know that it was the right move, but I'm glad that I did it because, again, like you don't know if it's going to be that like, hell yes, like I love this, unless you try things out, like unless you start to, kind of get your feet wet and you're just like, you know what, I did that. And this is a great thing to do, a great tactic to, put in your toolbox is at the end of the year, go back and look at the things that you did and say, I loved working on this project, and then look at the other ones and say, I did not, and I will not do this again. So be very mindful of the things that you do say yes to. But if you say yes to something and you realize later, like, I probably shouldn't have done that, take note of that. Make sure that you don't do that in the future, whether it was the collaboration or maybe just that specific audience, you didn't, get any traction from it. Just take note of it. That way, going forward that that's not something that you want to do. One of the other collaborations I did was working more strategically with Buzzsprout. And then now in 2020, I'm actually part of a brand new pilot program that they're testing out. It's the Buzzsprout Creators Program. And I'm super excited about it. There's some really cool things that I can't wait to share with you over the course of the year. But partnering with them is just as simple as I was just an affiliate. And what does that mean? That means I talk about them all the time. And I don't talk about them because they're paying me to talk about them. I talk about them because I genuinely believe in their podcast hosting site. Like, I love it. And I've been with them from the very beginning. So yeah, I don't have a comparison of what anything else looks like. But at the same time, if it's not broke, I'm not going to try to fix it. I love everything that they've done, from Travis coming on the show and talking to us. If you haven't, go back and listen to the best podcast hosting site episode I did with Travis, where we just dive into all things podcast hosting. They're just such a giving organization. And if you want to learn more about Buzzsprout, go to the show notes, krystalprofit.com/episode 122, and you can check them out. And like I said, I love the support that they offer as a company, but also they want you to be a part of their community. And I suggest go and join their it's a public Facebook group. I think that you have to go in. It's free. It's one of those things. It's an amazing Facebook group and I'll link to it in the show notes, but it's all about collaboration and people asking questions. I see questions in there all the time. It's actually where I get a lot of the questions from the community is from this group, because it's such quality people. And the people that are in there have such a giving heart to actually help people, because it's either podcasters who have been doing this for a while, or they're brand new baby podcasters who have no idea what they're doing. And it's almost like, oh, I'll help you, not in a pitiful way, but in a, I remember being stuck. I remember feeling not as confident as I am today. And I remember wanting to quit, whenever something went wrong, or I screwed up my interview, or I did this or I did that. And so that is what I love so much about this community. It's just such a great place to collaborate with other people. So that has been one of my strategic partnerships and collaborations of 2019, which is working more closely with Buzzsprout. And honestly, guys, if you have a service or a company, an organization within your niche, talk about them. Talk about them until you're blue in the face, and they'll probably take notice. That's really, I've had people ask me well, how did you first partner with Buzzsprout? And I'm like, I didn't stop talking about them. If you go back to some of my very first episodes, I'm talking about Buzzsprout because that is how much I love this company. And I truly believe in what they're doing. The people that work there have such a servant attitude, a servant's heart, and I just really appreciate it. And I took note of it. So I won't talk about Buzzsprout the whole episode. That's not what we're about here today. We were talking about increasing your listenership, but another organization that I collaborated with was Asa Collective. So if you are a female podcaster, I encourage you to go to asacollective.com and you can learn more about this organization. They are strategically in place to help female podcasters. Sorry, guys, this is just for the ladies, but to help female podcasters grow their shows and to have potential sponsorships. So I want you to go check them out. You'll see everything that they've done, but I partner with them and they have a online course, and I did a section of their online course all about branding. So I'm going to link to that in the show notes as well, and you can find more information about it. But they approached me and they were like, hey, I know that you love to talk about podcasting. So me being my geeky podcast self really paid off here. But Shannon reached out to me. She's with Asa, and she was like, I would love for you to do the branding section because I think you do this really well. And I was super flattered and kind of blown away. And I was like, yes, because again, it aligns with what I'm doing. It's an opportunity for me to talk to other podcasters. So I was super excited about it. And I just think collaborating with people and organizations that are similar to what your podcast is already about is just going to pay off. It's totally going to pay off because they're going to be filled with potential listeners, and it's going to be a great way for you to increase your audience. The second thing I want to talk about when it comes to increasing your listenership is guesting on other podcasts with audiences aligned to yours. Now, this does not mean that you have to go onto a podcast that is exactly like yours or has your cookie cutter, exactly the same audience. You don't have to do that. But I think that it's great to go in with the mindset of they just have to be interested enough in what I'm talking about. So what does this mean? So for example, I talk to entrepreneurs. That is who my podcast is mostly for. And if I were to go onto a marketing podcast, there's a good chance there's some entrepreneurs in there. Or if I were to go into, there's a lot of female entrepreneur, women who hustle, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of podcasts and different kinds of shows, whether it's a YouTube channel or a video show on Facebook. There's a lot of those different types of organizations and companies where I could potentially find more listeners within those shows because it's close enough. It's someone who could potentially be interested in podcasting. So I'm not just interested in convincing people who are already thinking about podcasting. I want to talk to those people who maybe have never thought about podcasting as part of a marketing strategy for their business. Maybe it's just business people in general. Maybe it's small business owners. Maybe it's multi-level marketing people. There are so many ways that you can tie in a podcast to a business strategy. So get creative. Start thinking about what are some podcasts that I could collaborate with. I could actually go onto their podcast and potentially reach people in their audience and have them come listen to mine. So again, I preach this all the time. Y'all are probably so sick of me saying this, but value, value, value. How can you add value to these other podcasts and their audience? Because that's ultimately what's going to be what brings them from someone else's audience into yours and how you get them to hang around. Because you don't want to just be a one-hit wonder where someone shows up and they're like, oh, this is great. Yeah, cool. Thanks. Bye. You want them to come back every single week, every single time you put out a new piece of content, because eventually you want to lead them down the funnel. You want them to be a client or a customer or just be part of your community, even if they never buy anything from you. I have so many people that are part of this community that probably have no intention of ever buying anything from me, but they like my personality, they like my honesty, they like my quirkiness, maybe they just like my Texas accent. I don't know what it is, but they keep coming back because they just like being here. They just like listening to me and hanging out with me. And I so appreciate that. So shout out to all of y'all who are just here to hang out with me because I love this. And if you weren't here, I would just be talking to myself and it wouldn't be as much fun. So I love the engagement. I love your support and I appreciate it so very much. And the third tip that I have for you today to increase your listeners for your podcast is to plug your show every single chance that you get. And I know like there's a right way and a wrong way to do this. I'm not telling you to be spammy. Spammy just makes me cringe. That is not what I'm talking about because I get spam messages all the time from people who don't know how to market themselves. They don't know how to market their business, and they are literally like repelling me from ever even wanting to talk to them. And it really stinks whenever it's someone that you know or like a high school friend of yours that you remember fondly. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, if I run into this person in the grocery store, I'm going to turn around and run the other way. You do not want to be that type of person, but you do want to talk about your podcast any chance that you get. So how do you do this in a way that doesn't completely make people have like they're running for the hills? You don't want that to happen. You go back to value. And your podcast won't be for everybody. I've seen some posts where people get very upset. They're like, oh, my family isn't supportive of my podcast. Like they're not listening to it or this and that. Well, you probably didn't make your podcast for your family. I know I didn't. I know if someone in my family, I take that back. My mom listens to my podcast every once in a while because my mom has a podcast. Go check out the Edible Gardens podcast whenever you get a chance if you're interested in gardening. So shout out, Mom. There's a plug for you. But it's just like, not everyone that I know, like I have friends that they don't even listen to podcasts, and that's fine. But if you have people in your social media, if you have people on your email list that can value from what you're talking about in your podcast, then talk about it. Talk about it. There's a good chance that they are there to learn about that exact thing that you've created this podcast for. So make sure that you're talking about it every single chance that you get, but lead with value. Don't lead with, I have a new podcast. Here's the link to my podcast. Here's this, here's that. Don't be that kind of spammy person. Lead with value. What kind of value? So for example, what is the value that you're getting here today? The value is, what are you doing to increase listeners? So if you have a podcast, you're interested in increasing your listeners. That is the value that I'm leading with. I didn't start today by saying, hey, go listen to the podcast. I started with, I'm going to tell you about how you can increase your listeners. And if you're a podcaster, that is something of value to you. So lead with value and never stop talking about your podcast. But that does it for today. So I hope that you found some value in how to increase your listeners. And make sure you go check out the show notes at krystalprofit.com/episode 122. And if this is your first time tuning in, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate every single one of you. And if you are new and you haven't subscribed yet, then I encourage you to do that. Go wherever you're listening to this podcast, hit that subscribe button. That way you're notified every time we put out brand new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. And like I said, show notes are at krystalprofit.com/episode 122. Make sure that you sign up for the free 5-day Create Your Podcast Bootcamp. If you have not done that already, it's going to show you how to start, launch, and market your podcast, as well as give you some insight into planning your content and some other just fun things that I think are fundamental to setting up your podcast and having it start off with some great momentum from the very beginning. But remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Krystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Krystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of fan mail shout outs.